program will begin shortly. Launch sequence. Activate. Warning, the following content is not politically correct. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. I am Sarah Higdon. This is Transform to Freedom. Hope you all had a great week. It's been pretty good for me. So last week I got to do some pretty cool stuff, which I can't wait to share with you, but can't actually share it right now because so I was on a film set last week. For an organization that is pretty cool, and it was a pretty cool event. I was actually get to interact with some Hollywood extras, kind of integrated behind the scenes on the set, and it was really interesting because when I go in to do something like this, I was there, and I tend to observe. I mean, I think that being former military, I just tend to want to sit back and observe and just pay attention to everything that's going on around me. In this, it was really interesting because we were doing something that it was the topic of the video was a fairly controversial topic that is mainstream, and they had a lot of these extras kind of split up into what side of the issue that they were on. One was very conservative side, one was very liberal side, and then there really was no in between. And it was just quite interesting to see that so many people, like it kind of started off, I guess the way that you would kind of expect, right? So mostly everybody reluctant to raise their hands. They're like, I don't necessarily want to raise my hand. This is a controversial topic, all that stuff. But it did seem like the side that was, more on the leftist side was more willing to raise their hands quickly. Like they were like, oh yeah, this is what I believe. And then as you start to talk to people, like behind the scenes, people, they ended up having to start like assigning people to the other side. As you start to talk to people, it almost seemed like more people there were actually like on the conservative side of the views than anything else. Does it start? So Jen McMahon asked, does it begin with a capital A? No, it actually doesn't start with a capital A. It starts with an I. And I'll let you all know when this comes out. I'm super excited about it. An organization, but it was really cool. I was down on the big film sets and everything like that, and yeah. So also hope you guys had because we didn't do the show last week because it was Labor Day, right? So I was hanging out with friends doing barbecue stuff in the city, and it was a great time. Then got out to go see a baseball game yesterday, which was really fun too. So it's just been a pretty good week. It's been a busy week. But yeah. Now, speaking of busy weeks, I don't know if y'all are in Atlanta or whatnot, and obviously you may not be able to make this, but I can't. Like next week is going to be amazing because if you haven't seen, I am the special guest. Me and Andrew are going to be starring, are going to be the special guest for Blair White's podcast channel, her podcast tour. We're the guest for the debate, or we're the guest for the show that's here in Atlanta. She's got some great guests coming up too. So if you're in any of those cities, there's gonna be some great guests. I know the first episode or the first show that she's doing is it tomorrow or it might be Wednesday or Thursday. But the first guest is with Roseanne, which is just an amazing combination. It's in Austin. And then I think the next day it's in Phoenix, Arizona. Her and Buck Angel Buck Angel is the special guest. Then next week on Tuesday, it's in DC, and I don't think she's announced a special guest for the DC shoot yet. But and then Wednesday, it's in Brooklyn, New York, with another good friend of mine, Ariel Scarcella. So that's gonna be really cool. And then obviously, the last one that she's announced so far is Atlanta on September 9th. It's gonna be me and Andrew. So it's gonna be a good time. I can't wait. Like, I'm super excited for this. Can't wait to shoot this. Hang out with Blair again. I haven't seen her. We haven't hung out in person since the Jubilee shoot, but it's gonna be a good time. We're gonna hang out. We're gonna have fun, and it's gonna be really good to reconnect. But here are the rest of the dates for Blair stuff. If you're in any of those locations, I know that she's going to be continuously announcing new special guests that she's got coming on. So definitely go check her out. So yeah. And but with that, let's kind of dive into the topics of the day, right? The first thing we kind of talk about some of this. If you're new to the show, we kind of do like to launch in and kind of talk about stuff that we've hit on in the past, if there's new information or anything like that. So today I wanted to bring up, because a lot of people, like, we talk about California and how they're abusing the foster care system, that they will take your children because if you do not affirm that child's gender identity. And a lot of people would say that's not happening. It can't happen, but it is a sanctuary state, and yes, children can run away there. If you saw, we talked about it when I was on the Culture War podcast, which we'll talk a little bit later in the show as well. But if you saw when I was on the Culture War podcast with Tim Pool and Chloe Cole and Harrison, we talked about Harrison's deal in California winning full custody, which was just an amazing feat in and of itself. So it's kind of crazy to me that something like this would happen. So the Daily Signal reveals, and there's going to be a full, I think, report on this soon. The reporter put this out there, though, where this mom basically had CPS come and take her child because she refused to transition the child. So here's the video.
It was devastating, and it ruined my life. I mean, I lost my husband, but this was worse than losing my husband, because I had my rights taken away.
I'm Elizabeth Mitchell, and I sat down with a mom in California who lost her 14-year-old daughter to the California foster care system.
It was really strange. It just came out of nowhere that all of a sudden, I want to be a boy. I feel suicidal. I was concerned, so I called the police, and they came out and they checked her out. The officer was like, well, you should just be, more accepting of your daughter. This officer went outside with the PEP team, had a conversation with them after my conversation with her, and they decided to take her. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I wouldn't.
So I think they're going. This is kind of the first video to launch this series. I'm actually excited to. I'm interested to see what they've uncovered in this investigation. I'll say again, this is California, but this is what's going to happen everywhere. Tim Walz, again, signed a bill that was worse than what they have in California. They're another sanctuary state. It's like in the country where we have this battle between forcing transitions and banning transitions, a lot of the states Like, it's either one or the other in most of these states. If they are a far leftist blue state, then this is what you see. You're going to start seeing more of this. We've seen this happen. Again, we talk about Sage's Law in Virginia, which failed to pass in Virginia, even though a child was harmed because they decided to take the child because the parents were kind of caught off guard and weren't using the proper name and pronoun in court. And then now Sage is back with her parents as a fully functional presenting female, as she was, and they still can't pass this law, which really would have saved Sage from this. But in California, what you're going to see, unfortunately, with something like this, if CPS is going to start taking children away from parents, stealing their children, again, this is stealing of children. This is, in many regards, this sets up for human trafficking issues, stuff like that in California by way of the government. And if they start taking children and putting them again into foster homes. So what happened with Sage's Law, she ran away from home to meet up with somebody she met on the internet. She was found days later, like in a closet where where she had been sexually abused by a number of adults, and all because that she had not, told her parents. She ran away from home and didn't tell her parents about like wanting to use like a different name and pronoun or anything like that. Fast forward, then the court that CPS takes their parents to court because of child neglect, or I forget exactly what it was, because she ran away. The judge in the case was like, you need to use proper name and use whatever name and pronoun your child wants you to use. And they were just kind of caught off guard, and they used the wrong they used their legal name and pronouns in court. And so instead of sending Sage back with grandma and grandpa, because I think it was grandma and grandpa that had custody at the time, they sent her to a boys' home where she was again abused. But that's what you're going to see happen in a state like California, where they're sending children to boys' homes, or the CPS is taking them. They're not going to put a female in female dorms in California. They're going to send a female who identifies as male to a male dorm, setting up the case to where that child will probably be abused. So this is what we're voting on in the next election, because the people on the Democrat side, Tim Walz, has signed bills into law like this. Thankfully, though, some people are walking away, right? So the next story that kind of talking about this is this state legislator in Texas decided to change her party because of the Democrat stance on child transitions. So, and she did it while speaking at the Moms for Liberty conference last week. So, what's her name? Sean Theory, or Thierry, she was, and if I remember correctly, she was the only Democrat in Texas to vote against or vote for the bill that banned puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries in the state of Texas. She was the only Democrat that voted for it. She made national news. I remember it. I remember writing about it. And I think I spoke about it on this channel, calling her a hero. And she decided to do what somebody who I know here in Atlanta, so the representative of Midtown Atlanta, is switched her party last year. What's her name? Drawing a blank on her name. I met her not a few months ago, and she's running for office again. But there's the person here in Atlanta. She changed her party more so because of school choice. But when she talked to me, she said that she had actually realized like she was voting with Republicans most of the time in the state legislature. And so at the end of the day, it kind of made sense for her to switch because she wasn't part of a party. She was voting on her values, but the Democrats, that D next to her name, didn't actually support her values and she would take a lot of flack, for voting with Republicans most of the time instead of voting voting in lockstep with the Democrats. And that's what you're saying. They're just voting most people are just voting in lockstep with leadership, and then for fear of reprisal. And so, like she says, the Democratic Party has veered so far left, so deep into the progressive abyss that it now champions policies that I cannot in good conscience support, policies like promoting sex changes for vulnerable children, dismantling Title IX, and others, she said. So, good on her. I said she was a warrior. I remember, again, I'm pretty sure I talked about it even just on this show last year. We need more people to stand up like that. As I said on that Timcast episode, these policies are not popular. 60% of Democrats disagree, according to a Harvard Harris poll that they did last year, and I don't think they've ever done this poll again, because I haven't seen it. I went through a lot of their polls and was spot checking, and I haven't seen this poll done yet since last year. But it was 67% of Democrats didn't agree with transitioning children. And it was something like 78% of the general population didn't support transitioning children. And so why is this continuing to happen? And I think it really comes down to the fact that so many people, they're voting on so many different things that it's sad that, sterilizing and causing life-altering harm to children is so far down on people's priority lists that they're willing to vote for somebody who votes for that. And and those legislatures are doing it because the activists want them to. They want to look, I don't know if they want to look good. I mean, they're still getting voted into office because people are still voting for them. Good point, Jen McMahon says. Putting a kid in foster care system is insane, especially when a parent or parents, etc., don't want to enable a minor's delusion. This is the prison system all over again, but for minors. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The foster care system should be the last place we want children to go. If you have a loving family that is good at taking care of you and is involved in your life, is not abusive, then they should never be, that should be the last place we want children to go. You're setting a child up for a rough life if you put them in the foster care system in general. Like, again, if a parent is doing, like, this is something that parents have the right to make this decision. It's not abusive to not, quote unquote, affirm a child's gender identity. That's not abusive. Like, there's different levels, and unless a child is being abused, they should not be sent into the foster care system in general. That's my thought. But okay. Moving on. Now, this is kind of the top story. One that I wanted to talk about actually quite a bit, because it's probably the closest story I have today that to me and what I do. So, if you didn't know, last week, the Department of Justice indicted two Russian TV media affiliated Russians, accused them of money laundering $10 million to conservative company Tenet Media to sow division in the U.S. So if you haven't seen this, whole thing going on. So apparently these two Russians, they concealed their identity. They invested into the new media company, and it seemed like they were starting this media, Tenet Media, which I didn't know until this actually came out, that Lauren Chen and her husband were the founders behind it. I will say, look, I'm not gonna accuse Lauren of knowing or doing anything wrong here. There does seem to be some suspicion, but I am going to withhold judgment on what her involvement actually was in all of this. Okay. And I will say this as somebody who I've known Lauren probably since I started doing this. Okay. Since I started creating content, I've known Lauren. We haven't always had we're not like friends. We never hung out in person or anything like that. But I will say back in 2021, when I still was a very small channel, I had less than 300 YouTube subscribers at the time. And she came on this channel and she did an interview, and it was great of her to do that. It was great of her to come on, somebody who was just really starting out, not even just somebody who was just really first starting out, a trans person who was just really starting out. And I remember that video was the first video that I ever did that even got over 1,000 views. Now, and then about a couple months later, I will say that she defended me. We were both on, again, I was a very small creator. We were both on the Blaze TV Slightly Offensive, with Elijah Schaefer, who has had his own controversies in the past, obviously. And me and Elijah have not had a good relationship. I wouldn't say that I even really consume any of his content anymore. But at the time he was with Slightly Offensive, he was on the Blaze, and it was a pretty big deal for me to get on a show like that and to be able to speak my mind. So it was a debate show. I was able to speak my mind, and actually it really came off as Lauren was defending me in a lot of ways. And then after the show, the Christian nationalist crowd was more so attacking the people that go to these different conferences, and Lauren made a comment just kind of off the cuff, not mentioning anybody, but she said something like, it's really interesting, all these Christian nationalists out here who talk about having these values and what's a sin and what's not a sin, when they're all sleeping around and doing all this sinful behavior at these conferences, like these well-known things, and people knew this behind the scenes. It's been happening for years. Like behind the scenes, these people are not what they present to be online. And she was outing stuff like that. What I will say is I have in the last year noticed a shift in Lauren's content. I've noticed her become more that Christian nationalist mentality. I won't say she's gone so far as a lot of the other ones. Again, I still think that me and her would be able to have a conversation about stuff. But I do think that she's made a little bit of a shift to the right in that regard. And so it's interesting to see when this launch of Tenet Media and her shift in content had actually changed. And it seems to be around the same time. So I don't know. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. The indictment itself does not levy any accusations really against Lauren or her husband. They were it's an indictment on 2 foreign nationals, not Lauren. I just watched a video from what is that, the Actual Justice Warrior channel. Forget his name right now, but he laid it out, and he seems to think that even the indictment itself could in some ways exonerate Lauren and her husband, that they were also duped by these Russian nationals, that they were just pawns in the game as well. I don't know. I'm again, like I said, I'm going to withhold judgment on that. And now, full disclosure, y'all know, again, I mentioned it earlier in this show. I was on I was on the Timcast Culture War show a few weeks ago with Chloe and Harrison, which that show was on Tenet Media. So that was the show that Timcast licensed over to Tenet Media for and it was just a straight license. They were paid per episode to license the show and put it on their platform and grow it. And I firmly believe that all the creators, so it was Dave Rubin, what was that? So Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Taylor Hanson, Lauren Southern, and there was one other person that I really didn't know on there. And those were the creators that were on the show, which again, I thought it was kind of odd that Lauren didn't use her personal face, her name and face. What is going on? She didn't use her name to didn't use her name and face to actually like help promote the channel. Like, I didn't know that she was part of this until it had come out. Until all this news kind of broke. I didn't know she was even involved, because she still was working for the Blaze, so here's what happened though. After all this kind of comes out, I think that the creators themselves were basically victims of crime, of whatever this is. I mean, the Timcast Culture War show seems like they would just put that. I think that a lot of these creators, like Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, and even Lauren Southern and Benny Johnson, they seem to all have creative control over their own material. Taylor Hanson was a on-the-ground reporter. So there's really no pushing of narratives on here. And I guess the indictment did say in one spot that a creator was asked to talk about something. They said, yeah, I'll talk about it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they were going to push the narrative that the Russians wanted them to push. Like, Tim Pool says he had full creative control. His is the Culture War show. So if you're trying to sow discourse in the country, that's not the show you want to be on there. Because in fact, like, the Culture War show, what it does is bring people from both sides of an issue together to have a civil conversation. If you want to cut and divide, you wouldn't have a debate show like that on your platform. So it really seemed like a weird show to have on there, because it does the exact opposite as sowing division. It actually brings people together. It kind of brings the sides together. So I don't necessarily get that. That why that would be something that, other than that's the one show from Timcast that they could license, and that was just there to simply promote and grow the platform. Like, you have a big name like Tim Pool that's going to help promote and grow your platform. Again, Taylor Hanson is just on the ground doing on-the-ground reporting of events that are happening. There's no like push for a narrative there. So that, again, doesn't make sense. Lauren Southern is Canadian. Yes, she does talk American politics, but she lives in Canada. And I like Lauren. I feel bad I probably feel the worst for Lauren in this entire thing because she's already been through enough controversies, and so I just kind of feel bad that she was wrapped up in a lot of this. So this is Lauren Southern I'm talking about. But I mean, in there, in the indictment, you can tell. I mean, the DOJ itself says that these creators are victims. Like in the indictment itself, let me see. The Dave Rubin actually posted this and said, I think this speaks for itself. It says, Founder 1 and Founder 2 worked together to mask U.S. Company 1's true source of funding, RT, so Russian TV, by falsely portraying to Commentator 1 and Commentator 2, which is alleged to have been Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, that U.S. Company 1 was sponsored by a private investor named Edward Gregorian. In truth and in fact, Gregorian was a fictional persona. For example, during contract negotiations, Commentator 1 requested that Founder 1 provide a profile or article on Edward Gregorian. In response, Founder 1 sent Commentator 1 a one-page profile provided to Founder 1 by another fictional persona purporting to represent Edward Gregorian, falsely describing Edward Gregorian as an accomplished finance. It goes on, but that's the main part is that Founder 1 and Founder 2 work together to mask U.S. companies' true source. So they mask the source of funding from these creators. It's this ad. This ad is not helping me. Okay. And so then it kind of came out later, it came out later that as the DOJ was announcing the indictment, Lauren and her husband, Liam, their house was being raided as the indictments were dropping. So this was unknown to them that this was happening. Their house got raided, and that's all we know at this point. There was a somebody put this, and this actually all happened right as the Biden-Harris administration also announced on Wednesday that it had seized 32 internet domains that were allegedly acting on the behalf of the Russian and Foster division in the upcoming election. Now, there was somebody, I don't have this tweet. I don't have this tweet to talk about, to pull up, but somebody made a good point today. And it was that, what this actually shows, though, is how the U.S. government has all of these communications between Lauren, her husband, and all these other people using Patriot Act level FISA warrants. And so they're spying on American citizens. Actually, Lauren and her husband are both Canadian citizens, but they're spying on the communication between all these commentators and Lauren and her husband, as well as the other going back to spy on these Russian agents. And they really haven't shown what probable cause they had to even investigate this in the first place. So this was basically what would be an unconstitutional wiretap and investigation into this. So you could look at that. I think we should all be cognizant that whatever you post online, whatever you talk about in Discord service in Discord or any of these online platforms, as we talked about, even with Telegraph. What is it? Telegraph. Is that what it is? Let me see. Telegram. Last week or 2 weeks ago, after the founder of that was, because the founder of Telegram was not giving access to the site to government, they will go in and but everything that you're talking about online, they can go in and they are spying on you. Now, first thing, one of the big things that's happened as a result of this, so YouTube went in and took down Lauren's YouTube channel, which had like I think that last time I looked at her channel, it had something like 700,000 and something subscribers, but that was a while ago that I actually checked that. So she could have even had a lot more than that. Tenet Media had a few 100,000 subscribers to it, and it was also taken down. And then the weird one was Taylor Hanson's personal account, which hadn't been used since the start of Tenet Media, was also removed from YouTube. Now, here's the thing. None of these people have been accused of crimes. Lauren, nor even Tenet Media itself, has been accused of committing a crime. The crime that's being accused on the Russians is that they did not register themselves as foreign agents acting within the United States. They were money laundering through different countries, through shell organizations in different countries. Lauren has not been indicted on anything. Her husband has not been indicted on anything. In fact, Tenet Media was not accused of any crimes in and of itself. U.S. Company 1 was not accused of committing the crimes. It was simply the investors who were indicted on crimes. And Taylor Hanson, again, is a victim in all this, and yet his account was taken down as well, which makes absolutely no sense to me. But I do believe that YouTube should be leaving these accounts up. You know, I do believe in innocent until proven guilty in this situation, which is why I'm holding back. You know, why I'm holding back on this, And honestly, it all comes like right after. And I do believe that the Russians are funding both sides. They're trying to get in and exactly do that. Sow discourse into the country, not for one side or the other. I mean, as all this was happening, Vladimir Putin endorsed Kamala Harris. Last week, he endorsed Kamala Harris after have previously endorsing Joe Biden. Now, who actually helps the Russians if they win the election? Well, since the Russians have basically done whatever they want when Democrats are in office, I'm going to assume that it's going to be it's going to be Democrats. But I mean, I still wouldn't doubt if Putin endorses Kamala because he just wants to cause chaos. He wants us to fight. So I can come in here and say, you know, oh, look, to the Democrats, like, oh, look, Vladimir Putin is supporting you. Maybe you are not the right people to be supporting. And then they're going to be like, he's only doing that to make us lose, to make us look bad, because he knows that will make us look bad. It's like the whole 4D chess stuff, right? Which I get it, but it's all just to sow discourse. And again, like when Obama was in office, Putin took Crimea. When Trump was in office, we had a pretty peaceful 4 years. Nothing really happened in that region. And then with Biden's in office, he invades Ukraine completely. So I think, I mean, Putin has basically free reign to do what he wants when the Democrats are in office. So I do think that he would probably rather them be in office. And it's not a good thing that he endorses Kamala Harris. I don't think it's a good thing. And here's the other thing that I've been thinking about. And so this pulls up the tweet that I have up now. Adrienne Curry is actually right. She says, are there any influencers or media funded by Israel, China, or Iran? politicians. Is the DOJ going after them next? Thought so. Basically saying no, probably not. And really, this has kind of got my issues flowing, because you know my thoughts on stuff like Israel. Not like when I'm not like on the side where like Israel bad. No, I think Israel has a right to exist. I'm not a though I'm not a I'm not a Zionist, but I think that Israel at this point has a right to exist in their country without threat of attack. But I don't think that they have a right to U.S. money. They make their own money. I am anti-foreign funding of any of these countries. I'm anti-foreign funding of any foreign policy positions. The U.S. just needs to stay out of it, because generally what we do is we just cause more issues. The stuff that has come out that Israel has done is quite concerning to me. But by no means am I sitting here saying that I am pro-Palestine at all. In fact, I think that Israel should take over Gaza but without but the problem is that they're doing it the wrong way. They're doing it with so many civilian casualties that I have really an issue with this. So that's where it kind of gets murky. But, AIPAC, Thomas Massey has talked about AIPAC. Like, Israel funds a lot of stuff in the United States, and that's completely fine. They fund most of our politicians. Like, Israel is lobbying everywhere in this country. And there's no issue with that. There's no issue with a foreign entity lobbying so hard because of who it is. I mean, think about China, though. China's doing it a lot too. China's investing. China's buying up a ton of land in this country, and all that land seems to be right next to military bases, and that's like okay. No, it's not okay. It shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening anywhere in this country. But yet, because it's China, and we don't want to upset China, even though they're a communist country, we don't want to upset them and start World War III. So we're just going to let them kind of come in and secretly invade our country instead. I don't know what she's talking about with Iran, but I can talk about Saudi Arabia, for example. Nobody wants to talk about Saudi Arabia, even though they're committing genocide and they're committing a genocide in Yemen. And this is a knock I actually had against Donald Trump last year. Is Donald Trump has hosted and participated in stuff that's hosted by the Live Golf tournament. If you don't know, Live Golf is owned by the Saudis, and they're paying millions of dollars to professional golfers for what? What is their end state? Like, you're taking money from a country who is actively involved in atrocities in Yemen. And so, but nobody's going after Live Golf. Nobody's going after all these other things that are paying influencers and media. I mean, listen, where are all these other, I mean, there's a lot of leftists getting paid from leftist causes. Victor, you may want to go and do some Google work, because yes, Putin absolutely did endorse Kamala. I'll show you. Russia backs Kamala Harris. Putin's history of U.S. election endorsements. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday said Moscow would back U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party nominee. You want to talk? Yeah, unsubscribe. I don't care. This isn't an airport. But this isn't misinformation. This is the facts. I am presenting the facts. And you can go on any news site and see this. Here's the BBC. Here's Newsweek as Donald Trump mocks Putin's comments. See, CNN put it as Putin trolls U.S. presidential race. But yeah, I'm not spreading anything. He said he endorsed, and so where's the lie? Where's the lie? I see Victor's now left the chat. Yeah, but that's the whole thing about this. So let's see, where are we at? Why are we not going after all these other countries that are doing this? But to be fair, and I can't believe I'm saying to be fair to the feds, but kind of fun that here is the thing though. The FBI did raid the aides to two top aides to New York City Mayor Eric Adams' office. Now you remember this has kind of been going on for a little while. So and okay, yeah, Kathy Hochul was one of Kathy Hochul's aides was charged on suspicion of being an agent from the Chinese Communist Party, just as the DOJ, just before the DOJ announced this stuff on Tenet Media. Go figure. So there's been a lot of that seems to have taken up the news cycle to cover up, and it has overshadowed Kathy Hochul's aide being arrested and charged on suspicion of being an agent for the Chinese. Also, the FBI has seized stuff for its investigation into whether or not Mayor Eric Adams' campaign has received illegal contributions from Turkey. So there is a little bit of going after their own. But now remember, Eric Adams, they didn't really go after him. He's been in office for a while. They didn't go after him until he started speaking out against the illegal immigration stuff in New York, saying that it was unsustainable and that the Biden administration needed to do something to help them. So what is it though? What is it about Kathy Hochul? She's got people from the CCP in her administration. What's his name from California? Sleeping with the Chinese spy. The Chinese seem to like to embed within the Democrats. So it's really interesting, right? So that's interesting. Let me see. And since we're kind of on this topic, let's kind of go into, yes. Dick Cheney has endorsed Kamala Harris. Yes, Eric Swalwell. Thank you, Todd. Yes, Eric Swalwell was sleeping with a Chinese spy in California. Thank you so much. But yes, so neocon, I'll say mastermind of the person or the architect. That's what they call him. The architect of all the problems we've had in the Middle East for at least the last couple of decades. Dick Cheney himself has endorsed Kamala Harris. And I just got to say, this is quite, it's quite interesting to see the parties change in real time. We're literally seeing the Republican Party being the anti-war party, while the Democrats have now basically been excited to become the party of perpetual war. So, in his statement, former Vice President Dick Cheney said, "In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the last election using lies and violence to keep himself in power after the voters had rejected him. He can never be trusted with power again. As citizens, we each have a duty to put our country in partisanship to defend our Constitution. That is why I will be casting my vote for Kamala Harris." Did he forget that they accused him of doing the exact same thing in 2000? They said that he was an illegitimate vice president in 2000 after the whole Al Gore Florida scandal that Bush Cheney had were not legitimate. Do they forget about this? Like, it's really funny to watch. Like, to me, this is actually I actually said, I think when I saw this, like, let me see what. Yeah. Oh yeah. Harry Sisson is like, wow, Vice President Dick Cheney just announced that he's voting for Kamala Harris. This is huge. Democrats, Republicans, and independents see a threat that Trump poses remarkable. Neocons see a threat that Trump poses. That's all the more the reason to vote for him. In my opinion, that is all the more reason to vote for him. If neocons, warmongers, are against Trump and they are endorsing Kamala because of it, it means that you have become the party of war. You have. Now, if you're not old enough to remember Dick Cheney, so Dick Cheney was very much accused early on. Like, a lot of people said that he kind of was the reason we went into Iraq, because he's the person that was pulling the strings behind the scene to actually go into Iraq. He all this dates all the way back to Bush Sr. When he was he was the Secretary of Defense under Bush Sr. Thanks, Chen, and has been sowing this Iraq, like, his mission has been to go into Iraq from the very beginning. It's so he kind of orchestrated a lot of this behind the scenes in going in there. That's the reason why, like, so early on, Democrats blamed him because of his position with Halliburton, the oil company. So that's why he's the reason why they said for so long that we went into Iraq for oil, not weapons of mass destruction, because Dick Cheney was was involved with Halliburton. But I'll say, I will say, I don't necessarily think we went into Iraq for oil. The reason I became so anti-war was after I was in the army for so long, and they were teaching me big picture foreign invasion, and I looked at a map and realized between Afghanistan and Iraq is Iran, and the only reason why you would want to go into Iraq is to have a strategic position, a double flank on Iran, so that you could someday invade Iran and take over that country and oust dictators there, right? Cheney is evil. He shot his friend in the face. And it's so funny to watch, Democrats just being like, oh my gosh, Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala. This is so great because it shows how bad Trump is. Like, I don't know if Harry's just young and doesn't remember this. I'm sure there's some of that. He's also just being paid. Probably we know he's being paid by the Democratic Party. But this is the type of attacks that Dick Cheney used to get. Like, this is code pink. War criminal of the week, Dick Cheney. And he's always said that he would do it again, but still invade Iraq. He at one point feared prosecution for war crimes because he is a war criminal, and they're cozying up to war criminals, which they honestly, looking back into the early 2000s, and I will admit, I was a neocon up until Ron Paul. Okay, after 9/11, I kind of talk about this. I was a neocon for quite a while. I was supportive of the Bush administration. I thought the Bush administration would be seen well in history for the things that they did domestically and overseas. I've actually switched my tune on them, but apparently so did the Democrats, because I remember them putting like Nazi symbols and stuff like that over Dick Cheney's face. So like him and Bush were both considered like evil, like Hitler-esque people for going in and being the pro-war party. And I truly believe that this is actually a win for Trump, because I mean, Trump has always kind of talked the talk when it came to being anti-war, but then he put Mike Pence as his VP. He still hangs around with Lindsey Graham, which I still don't get that. But lately, he is now surrounding himself with a lot of people who are very anti-war. So if we look at who has endorsed him, so even his new VP selection is the exact opposite. So J.D. Vance, well, I don't think he's a great VP selection. He is an anti-war veteran, very similar to me, not much older than me. I understand his path to voting for Trump, being with Trump in this election. But he's an anti-war. He's anti-war. He's bringing in Tulsi Gabbard to help out with the campaign. Tulsi is also an anti-war. I believe she's even still on active duty. Or she's still in the National Guard, I believe. I don't think she's gotten out. I think she's still in, and she's very anti-war. Bring them home. RFK Jr., anti-war. There are a lot of people that he is surrounding himself. Like I said, I think the only person that he hasn't really surrounded himself, like Lindsey Graham is like the only person that's like in the circle, and I haven't heard much from him lately that is, warmongering, pro-war. I mean, he had John Bolton in his administration last time, and I don't think that would happen in this administration. There's so much. And so when you see the list of former so Donald Trump, so the Republicans that are absolutely not voting for Trump: Mitt Romney, Dick Cheney, Paul Ryan, Dan Quayle, Mike Pence, and amazing, right? I mean, his own vice president, who was probably in his ear about, as a neocon in the last election, is not voting for him. That's big. That's a win for him, in my opinion. All those people are wins. Paul Ryan, when he was the Speaker of the House, and actually, funny story about him, when I was in D.C. to do Timcast a couple years ago and had just spoken at an anti-war rally that Sunday, I saw Paul Ryan in Reagan International like the next day going through security. It was kind of fun. I didn't say anything, but I should have. But I mean, he was spending. He was one of the worst people, spending tons of money as the Speaker of the House. He's not like the type of he's not the type of Republican that I would ever vote for again. But this was when he was when when I voted for Mitt Romney, I was very much still a neocon in those days. Obviously, I've changed quite a bit since then, and have learned from my ways. I was young once, like this Harry Sassone, you know. Hopefully one day he will wake up to his mistakes. Doubtful, but we'll see. He is like 20 years old, so 20 years old, you're young and dumb. Like I said, I graduated when I was 21 years old and served a few years in the Army. So it's about that time that he'll start reevaluating his political beliefs at some point, though, you know. And even this little dandy right here from 2020, this is Liz Cheney, who said, this is August 12th, 2020, during that election, Kamala Harris is a radical liberal who would raise taxes, take away guns and health insurance, and explode the size and power of the federal government. She wants to recreate America in the image of what's happening on the streets of Portland and Seattle. We won't give her the chance. So what changed? What changed, Liz? Is Kamala Harris still not that same person who you called out in 2020, and yet now you're going to endorse her? What changed? Come on now. Come on now. Funny that's going on. Last story I'm going to talk about today, and we're just going to make this one quick because we're at the hour mark, is if you saw last week, there was a school shooting just up the road from me, actually, up here in Georgia. And apparently, so the shooting happened, there were 4 killed and several others injured in the shooting. As you know, we don't say names of shooters on this channel. We're not going to give them the notoriety. But apparently the shooter's dad was actually arrested and charged with what was it? He was arrested for second-degree murder charges. He was also arrested for, I think the one he will actually get, he actually could find himself getting charged with, and is manslaughter. He was charged with manslaughter. And the reason I say that he might, so turns out the FBI was investigating this person last year after he apparently made reports, after he made threats that he was going to shoot up a school. They were investigating it. They went to his house. His dad knew. And apparently, even after his dad knew that the FBI was investigating him for threatening to shoot up a school, he's 14 years old? Dad still goes out and buys him a gun. Listen, I'm very pro Second Amendment, very pro gun. But if your son has threatened to shoot up a school and is having issues, and you know of these issues, you don't go buy them a gun. That seems like the last thing that you're going to do. In fact, if this was my child, my guns would all be either locked up, heavy in the safe, or I might take them somewhere else. They're not going to be here. I'm going to lock them up somewhere else that's very safe. Like, I may even lock them up like at the gun range or something, you know, or at least have one my personal sidearm around. But that's it. I'm not gonna go buy him a gun. So if you knew this and you bought him a gun, then I think then that's a little bit. But I mean, the FBI knew. He was on the FBI radar. It's like how does this type of stuff happen? If like, how does it keep happening that the FBI knows about these people before these things happen? It's a meme at this point, right? What's the point of having the FBI if they're not able to stop these things? something's continuously happens there. So and this is actually a little bit different too. I think I disagreed with charging the dad and mom in the Oxford, Michigan shooting, because I forget exactly what had happened with that one, but it wasn't so blatantly obvious. Oh yeah. The school called the parent. So the school called the parents because the son was having issues. The parents came to the school, and it was because they couldn't take him home. They weren't gonna pull him out of school. The school just said, okay, we're just gonna send him back to class then. He had the gun in his backpack at that time, and if the parents would have taken him home, he had easy access, I guess, to the gun, but it wasn't like so much that you were going to charge them like this. I don't exactly remember exactly what it was. That was kind of a gray area in that shooting, because the school knew something was going on. They just let him go back to class where he had a gun in his backpack, and then he committed the crime later. This dad absolutely, I with what's coming out, it absolutely seems reasonable to charge the dad in this case. Now I will say, and this is kind of be the last point I make on this, because you can kind of go, it's probably going to start. You're going to see a lot of. It's interesting because at first you saw that you thought that it was just going to kind of go away because you see the mugshot. What was first being reported was that the dad told police that he was being bullied for being gay. And then he had wrote in this Discord that he was expressing frustration that trans people were. Let me see what it actually say the first. So CNN's first reporting says, express frustration with the acceptance of trans people. So this is where I'm getting frustrated with the internet in general. People are reading biases into stuff like this without actually kind of clarifying what this means. So CNN first wrote, express frustration. Now what it really seems to happen is that he's not gay. He didn't like being called gay. And it made him angry. Because he did not see being gay as being okay. That's what it's kind of coming out as now, later. But you see, CNN just said he was expressing frustration with the acceptance of trans people. That is very ambiguous. Anybody can read a bias into that. So the left can say, or the right can say, they read into that he was angry at the lack of acceptance of trans people in society. That's the bias that they wrote into this. It could mean either way, right? With that there was the lack of acceptance or that they were being accepted. So the right ran with it. This is another trans shooter dealing with gender distress, everything like that. The right now has egg on their face because that's not what it said. In fact, CNN corrected the story and said because it was that he was expressing frustration that transgender people were being accepted into society. This guy's not a fan of trans people. What's interesting is it hasn't really broke back into the news yet, which is probably a good thing. I just kind of want it because now the left has their moment where they can say, oh, there's a trans genocide going on. This person didn't like trans people, so they were going to commit a mass shooting. And I mean, but that's what all was happening in 2023. He was saying that he was going to do it and wait a good 2 to 3 years. I need to go out knowing I did something, contributed something, and expressed hate towards the trans community and didn't like that he was being bullied for being gay, but he wasn't gay. Like I said, when you jump to conclusions, when you read your bias into stuff, this is what happens. And I will say this is one reason, and you guys know my colleague over at the Post Millennial, Andy, it's one reason I really appreciate Andy. Andy took the time to get it right. Okay. Because his initial post was reporting that bias that a lot of people on the right were reporting, where he was probably getting a lot of his sources from, but that he was not happy with, or he was being bullied for being gay, and that he was unhappy with the lack of acceptance for trans people in society. That's why he did this. Andy corrected his story. Andy said, I have deleted my first, expressed anti-trans post online in 2023 when he allegedly made threats online. I deleted my first post, screenshotted here, which made a claim counter to current reporting. I apologize for the wrong inference. I appreciate somebody like Andy who will go out there and admit when their reporting was wrong. He's one of the only people I know that will do that. There's still posts up there, and people are still thinking that this was a trans shooter or somebody, who didn't like trans people. So I really appreciate Andy being such a good reporter and being so dedicated to facts that he's willing to change the story like this. That's I wish more journalists on both sides of the aisle had that much integrity. All right. But with that, I hope you guys hold me to that standard too. I think I've shown on here plenty of times that I try to get it right. I try to speak in facts. Like, what's his name up there? Victor, who said I was spreading misinformation. I'm not spreading misinformation. Putin did endorse Kamala Harris. And I also admit that he could have been doing it to hurt her campaign. But at the same time, we don't know. It's also just a sow discourse. But I try to get it right. And I try to have the integrity to admit when I was wrong. To be quite honest, when something like this happens, like, it's gotten to a point, and it's kind of sad, where I'm personally, if something like this happens, when I hear of something like this happens, I do go into this mindset where I'm like, God, I hope it's not another trans shooter. God, I don't want, because that sucks. This is kind of the worst of both. This is the opposite side of that. If it's somebody that's kind of on the right, I'm kind of going, God, if they're on the right, I hope that they're not like anti-trans, and that's what they're shooting for. And so this was just a bad situation, but you got to report it the way that it is. This is like this sucks. Shootings are never good. Okay, shootings. There's ways to fix this that the left doesn't want to admit, and that we really need to have a good conversation about. And I've spoke before in the past how I think, school shootings in a lot of ways are a school choice issue. If I have kids, being former military, knowing how to secure a building or perimeters and everything like that, I'm going to walk every step of that school and know where their weak points are. My child would not be going to any school that was not safe, that I did not feel had proper security procedures. But a lot of parents can't afford to send their kids to private schools or change their schools for different reasons, because we don't have school choice in this country. So that's why first of all, I believe that school choice. Second, all schools are gun-free zones. So I believe that we're setting our children up to be sitting ducks. We don't defend our children with proper protection. The same way all schools should be just as secure to go into a school as it is to go into the state capitol building. You can't go into the state capitol building without getting through a metal detector and security. Why are we not securing our schools like this? Why do we not have armed guards at schools? I personally think that all teachers should be allowed to be armed if they go through proper training to carry in a school. Concealed carry, so that way nobody knows whether they're carrying or not, and then nobody also knows to if they are a sitting duck in that, or if they are the first, if they would be like the first victim in a shooting. I don't believe in open carry for that reason. But there are things that we can do when we're not having this conversation. And banning guns it's not going to solve it. Criminals, by definition, are going to get their hands on what they want. And this guy, in this situation, this dad bought it for him. And I agree with charging this dad. This dad was negligent in purchasing a firearm for his 14-year-old son, who was already on the FBI's list, and the dad knew it. Okay. But the FBI is not doing their job. How many times do we hear about this stuff happening and the FBI knew about the person beforehand? Like, all of them. And then, I could go on my rant about SSRIs and the mental health issues our children in general are having these days. But I've beat that horse to death, no pun intended, like throughout the course of this. And we can talk about it on different days, but our children are being so doped up on drugs instead of working through their mental health issues that they're having. The trans situation, the depression, anxiety, the loading them up on SSRIs, all of that is culturally based. That is a newer phenomenon. And why is it happening? I don't necessarily know the answers completely to a lot of those things, but I know that we need better mental health care and not just putting kids on medication, whether that medication be, hormone replacement therapy, puberty blockers, or SSRIs. We shouldn't be just like throwing this stuff. I do think that there is a incompetence in a lot of the mental health providers in the country right now, to where a lot of mental health providers are just, they don't want to do the work, or they don't know how to do the work to get to the root issues that people are having these days. And so they're going to go for the magic cure and throw an SSRI or throw a puberty blocker, throw cross-sex hormones at it, because that's the easiest path to feeling better for them. And I'm not saying this across the board for all mental health providers. I do know a lot of good mental health providers out there. But that's just what I'm seeing right now. I've seen it enough, but again, this isn't a across the board thing. It's just seems to be a vapid problem in our country, that our children are more medicated and they're not any happier. Why is that? I don't know. But with that, I'll leave it there. If you haven't already, like I always say, like I said at the beginning of the show, if you haven't yet, purchase your tickets to go see Blair White's podcast tour wherever you may, if you're close to any of those locations. Definitely check it out. If you're in Atlanta, I hope to see you next Thursday on it. If not, we'll be back here, same time, same place next week. Should be, as long as nothing. We'll just keep that. But we, be here, same time next week. If you haven't already, click that like and subscribe button below. Follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.